In the early 1970s, ecologist C.S. Holling published a paper in which he framed resilience as the capacity of an ecosystem to absorb disturbance and yet maintain function. Structure and feedback loops and return to a level of equilibrium such as existed before the disturbance, all part of it. He said ecosystems go through a continuous process called the adaptive cycle. There it is. In trying to maintain their equilibrium, all systems go through this loop. Exploitation, conservation, release, and reorganization. Resources are exploited to grow. Then resources are conserved to maintain what has been grown and maintain balance. And then a point is reached where the accumulated resources are used up, or relationships within the ecosystem change, or there's some trauma, and the system releases its equilibrium and fails. And then reorganizes itself. All living systems go through this cycle over and over and over again. Each of us and every collective human endeavor is a living system. Life itself is an adaptive process. The adaptive cycle is how we live, a process of being born and reborn and born again and born again and born again and born again. Once we stop this cycle of resurrection, the living system dies. Resilience is part of the adaptive process. Systems that can't bounce back from the release and failure die. End of story, period, every time. Resilience is not just about hope. It's not just about hanging in there till something better happens. It's about thriving again. A system that refuses to release will die. Sometimes quickly. Sometimes it will hang in a conservation stage until every single last resource is used up, but will eventually let go. And at that point, not have enough resources left to reorganize itself. Resilience is an immensely necessary and important spiritual practice to develop right now. As we move into the mid-21st century, we live in a time of catastrophic, widespread system collapse. Multiple systems on which we depend are releasing. We saw an example this week. Our governmental system has reached a point where there's a release coming. It is not working the way it used to. Everything it's conserved isn't playing out anymore. This is true in economics. The way we do education is the same way. Healthcare is the same. Even religion in this part of the 21st century has reached a point where everything we've conserved up to this point is starting to release and begging to be reordered and reorganized so it can thrive again. On top of all that, for even more good news this morning, the entire planetary ecosystem on which we depend is at that same point too. Uh-oh. Resilience is not just a cute little topic for church for a month. Resilience is about to become a necessary spiritual practice for all of us to learn and practice. This type of systems collapse going on all around us means there's going to be massive changes to a lot of things. The way we govern ourselves, the way we do our finances, the way we do school, the way we do healthcare, the way we do church. And this is going to cause an increased feeling of anxiety and disruption in most of us, whether we want it to or not. Widespread system trauma is probably much of the reason that so many people around the world have become estranged from one another, nationalistic, fearful, divided, violent, and even probably one of the causes of terrorism. People feeling that catastrophic collapse of the system they were counting on. The center cannot hold, as Yates wrote. Or as the New Poor People's Campaign says, there is no more moral center. We need to recreate it. Andrew Zolli writes that our society's failing systems assume a 20th century way of thinking about things, of continually moving from one problem we solve to the next we have yet to solve. And in this type of thinking, Zolli says there are no natural limits. It's onward and upward without end. But that's not how the life cycle works. The myth of having control and white supremacy and patriarchy and everything else that goes with it is now giving way to what Zolli and other resilience theorists call the time of inevitable surprise. And when we step back and think about it, sure. I mean, even what's going on with our current president and the disaster we saw play out this week, that's part of it, right? The old roadmaps and old infrastructure aren't working the way they used to. And then the question is, as change envelops us and we desperately try variations on things that used to work, we're going to find just trying different ways of the same old thing aren't going to work anymore. Zolli calls this, along with other theorists in resilience, convergent solutions. The problem of the same solutions and strategies in one form or another, in the same place, over and over. He uses an example that a spare tire, when you get a flat on a deserted desert highway, is a great thing. But carrying around 4 spare tires all the time, just in case, doesn't really leave you room even to put the groceries in when you go shopping. Right? We desperately try to square the circle and put the square peg in the round hole when we hit times like this. Then we get frustrated when it doesn't work. Because we don't need a square peg anymore. We don't even need a round hole. We need a whole new game. And Zolli says when we fall into the kind of deep redundancy of that spare tire, we get really negative. And many of us feel like we're caught in a crossfire we can't understand, as my favorite theologian Bruce Springsteen would say. But we are Unitarian Universalists, and a bedrock foundational theological idea for us is hope and joy. We talked about this with the 5 smooth stones. We always have more to learn. It's okay if we let go and release. There will be more to learn. We can reorganize and do it differently. There will be enough resources left over once we release to be creative with our reorganization. We have reason for ultimate, if not immediate, as this week showed us, optimism. Right? And our very survival is going to depend upon resilient organizations. And resilient organizations require resilient people. Those resources we put on paper out in the lobby and on our website, they're not just for me to be able to say, look at all this stuff I do. They're for you to use and dive deep into and find something that helps you become more resilient. That's why we do all that stuff, put all that stuff out there. What makes people bouncy? Well, one of the things we can do to be more resilient is reframe failure. Right? We have a very negative view of failure all too often. And we mistake a natural part of the life cycle for some personal, shameful, something wrong with us, right? Failure is part of success. Failure is part of the natural process of growing and regrowing again. One of the things I think about a lot when I try to explain this to people, there's a big difference between failing and being a failure, right? Those are two completely different things, right? Jimmy Carter lost the 1980 presidential election to Ronald Reagan by one of the biggest electoral margins in history. He failed. He's probably the single best human being ever to hold the office.
Oh, yeah.
He is not a failure, right? We lose this distinction for ourselves a lot too, right? That failing doesn't mean being a failure. And we need to reframe how we ask for help. Asking for help is a strength of character. It is not a weakness to need other people to help you. We need to stop shaming people who, by often no fault of their own, are poorer, left out, ignored, disadvantaged, right? Being rich does not mean you are some kind of better human being. Being powerful does not mean you are some kind of better human being, right? Everyone is going to need help, and none of us really get to where we are all by ourselves. It doesn't work that way. We need to remind ourselves to be healthy. Our emotional lives are intertwined at a cellular level, we are learning, with our physical self, right? So eating well and getting exercise are really important, not only to your physical health, but to your emotional health. Researchers are now starting to find that perhaps diet and exercise might be the single most important factor in treating depression. Even if medication and counseling are still needed, they work much better with good diet and exercise, right? We are knitted together, body, mind, and soul. We can't separate these things. We need to practice health in all our realms, which is one of the reasons why we provide for you all kinds of resources every month to explore for yourself all kinds of other ways to think about things and try and be healthier spiritually. We can develop spiritual practices to help us be more resilient, right? The spiritual practice is something we do with depth, we're serious about it, intention, we do it on purpose, and regularly. It becomes a regular thing. As a spiritual director, I recommend people have at least one daily, one weekly, one monthly, and one yearly practice. If you had one of those, it will help you. If you had two, it will help more. If you had three, it will help more. If you did all four of those, it would help even more. And the tough thing about a spiritual practice is it won't solve your problems. It will help you bounce back. It will help you to hang in, to have hope, to ask for help, to do the other things you need to be resilient. Right? Pete Townsend of The Who famously once said, "Rock and roll will not let you run away from your problems. It will, however, let you dance all over them." And one of the other things we can do is be as spiritual as possible, because as we learned from Andrew Zolli, what they're finding is that people with a very spiritual frame of reference, of a trust in something greater than themselves, whatever that is, a God, a cause, a whatever, right? We have that smooth stone of hope and joy. We always can learn more. We believe there'll be enough resources to justify our ultimate optimism, right? When we have this kind of approach and attitude, we are more likely to be able to be resilient. It just may be, they're speculating, an evolutionary survival strategy. Right? That's fascinating to me. So, as we become resilient people, one of the things we want to do is also be resilient parents. We want to raise resilient children. I think all of us who have ever been a parent, who are a parent, one of the things we think about all the time is how do we teach our children to deal with the ups and downs of life? Right? That's hard. And the first thing we have to do is practice our own resilience and our own health. Right? We have to manage our own emotions and thinking about failure and risk-taking and asking for help and trying again. And we shouldn't hide difficult stuff from children. There's an age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate way to talk about just about everything, but to hide things usually doesn't work. We should be intentional for not only ourselves, but our children in naming joy. A lot of times we're good at describing something bad happening, but we don't point out, hey, you're feeling great. We recognize, oh, you seem sad, are you okay? But we're much less likely to say, oh, you look awesome and happy, what's going on? Name the joy, not just the difficult stuff. It builds in memories that give us something to lean on when the difficult moment happens. It gives us the reality that there are better times and reinforces that. All this stuff builds on one another. Make intentional community time. They find that people who make intentional family time, intentional time with their friends, and are part of a religious community are more resilient. Because they have faith or trust in the fact that there is a community of people to help them. It's simple stuff, right? Help children find a passion. If we have a passion, something we are passionate about, it helps us build resilience and practice resilience because there's something for which we want to be there. And one of the best things we can do for our children, all of our children, is help them find passions in life. The singer Jason Isbell wrote a song to his daughter, and he says, I hope you find something to love, something to do when you feel like giving up, a song to sing, a tale to tell, something to love will always serve you well. And that is very, very true. We can teach courage. Courage is not being fearless. Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. You know, we can, all of us, be overprotective of ourselves and overprotective of our children. It's the hardest thing we have to manage sometimes as parents. Where's that manageable risk that lets people risk and fail and learn and yet not be harmful? That's hard, which is why we have intentional community and time with family and friends and a religious community, right? All this stuff works together. In looking for things this week, I found this cool book, 50 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Kid Do, by Geaver Tully and Julie Spiegler. They recommend activities such as walking a tightrope. My guess is 2 feet off the ground. They recommend developing skills like throwing a spear or a boomerang. They recommend engaging cool projects like melting glass. Experiences like sleeping out in the wild for no reason other than to do it. Right? All these things come with an edge of risk and vulnerability and fear, right? But it's by doing these things and learning we can that helps us be more resilient, more brave, more courageous, more sure of ourselves next time. And that's not just true for children, it's true for all of us. And somewhere along the line, we lose that ability, right? We get stuck in a pattern of conservation that worked for us once before, but no longer works for us again. We all develop these defense mechanisms of one type or another that helped us reorganize before when some trauma happened, but aren't helping us even hold on anymore, right? We need to let go, move on, and find something else that will work this time. That is also a difficult task, which is why we need the family and the friends and the religious community, because we don't do this together, right? Okay, I need more volunteers. Oh, don't make me go through this again. I need volunteers. Maybe a half dozen people asked me this morning if I brought the Bouncy Church. And I told each of them, I thought about it. And If it was a little warmer, if we were in April, not February, I probably would have.
Oh, man.
You own this?
Oh, no, but I would have found one. Because I'm resilient. Many of the things that help a person be resilient help a group or a congregation be resilient. We need support networks of other congregations. We need our family and friends. We need to practice spiritual and physical and emotional health. And we need to realize that we live in a difficult time for groups such as ours. The church historian Phyllis Tickle says that every 500 years in the West, the church goes through a massive rearranging and rummage sale and begins to reorganize after a time of dip, time of failure. She wrote a book about this. It's about 10 years old now, called The Great Emergence. And she says that this has happened on schedule every 500 years, about the fall of Rome, just past that, Gregory the Great, the Catholic Church, the 1,000-year schism at about the year 1000 between the Eastern and Western Church, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. Then in the early 1500s, Martin Luther separates from the Catholic Church and the Protestant Reformation starts. And the anniversary of Martin Luther nailing those theses on the door of the church was like 2 years ago, right?
Wow.
So we are in this time right now, this 500-year time where religion in our culture in the West seems to go through this massive reshuffle. Or as we would say in the adaptive cycle, this release and reorganization. And Tickle says the church that will emerge in the future, we don't know yet. It's forming itself. It's reorganizing. Doug Paget, a pastor of a non-denominational church in the Twin Cities, gives an interesting history of this last 500-year period we're in that led up to this right now, reshuffling we're starting to do. He said the American church, when Christians came over to this continent, the American church was born in an agricultural age. And everything it developed for itself was based on an agricultural way of life. Things were centered in the middle of all the farmland. People, if they were lucky, took one morning off a week because you know the cows can't be left unmilked for the weekend, right? And you just have to keep that agricultural way of life around the clock 7 days a week. And we organized church around that. We kept Sunday morning off, but people went back and had lunch and did their farms and went back in the afternoon, did church some more. And then, as things developed from agriculture to the industrial age, you had mass production. And Paget calls this the industrial age of church, where church was just like, business at that time. Industrial age, people tried to make as many replicas as they could as fast as possible and sell as many as they could. So churches developed denominations where they had a plan for how they would make the model church they wanted and put them here, 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 here. Our history as a denomination is exactly like that. How do we make more of us and put it here, 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 here in a way we know works, like an assembly line? And then in the information age, that begins to change in the last part of last century, where churches now start adopting new technology and reaching people in new ways. And it's not about mass producing, it's about mass reach, right? Mega churches, multimedia, podcasts, video. This is how we do stuff. Content kind of remained a little bit the same for a lot of churches, but delivery changed drastically. We don't deliver things through denominations in your local shop anymore. You get it online or in a massive gathering, right? And now Paget says we're in what he calls the inventive age. And the inventive age is one in which inclusion, participation, collaboration, and beauty are the essential values. To be successful in the inventive age, Paget says the church is going to need to be entrepreneurial to the core, to be willing to be constantly evolving, future-focused, lateral, non-hierarchical, open-sourced, permission-granting. We'll borrow from the forms of the past, but we will not be held hostage to them. And this is where many congregations, especially congregations our size, have a difficult time moving into this inventive age. Many congregations are constructed at their core to function in a time in history that no longer exists, including ours. Paget suggests that it is time for new wineskins. He says, church as we knew it may even cease to exist and will take on new forms that bear little resemblance to the old parish and denominational model. Wow. Now, if we get scared here and we hold on and conserve all our resources and we don't release a little bit and try and reorganize, what's going to happen? We die. And by we, I don't mean us specifically, although it could be. You know, any church in our model, the old parish congregational model. So what's the solution? We don't know. That's the whole part of this kind of time. It's a reorganizing time. We have to figure that out. And the first thing we're going to need is a little courage, because we can't buy into old modes of failure, like failure's a bad thing. Some of the things we've done before in the past are going to fail and they're going to stop working. Okay, we'll do different stuff. One of the things that most churches face around this right now, and we're coming to that time of year, is the old pledge drive. Well, here's the reality of the inventive age. The economy has changed. People in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they're lucky if they have only one job. They might not have health insurance. Their expendable income is much less than what it was in a person in their station a generation ago. Savings of churches have dwindled. The ability to run a church budget on pledge money alone is over. Those days are gone. That's from an age past. We need to find new ways to fund ourselves. So this year, instead of talking about make your pledge, make your pledge, make your pledge, when you became a member of this church, you agreed to do that anyway. We're not going to advertise to you to do it anymore. We're going to talk about how can we begin to think together about money and how we'll do this going forward. How will we reorganize and think about it differently? And we may get it wrong this year. We might fail. We'll be all right. We'll figure it out better next year. Right? This is going to be tough. Churches kill themselves and they have this lack of resistance most because they're good at conservation. This is the way we've always done it. Uh-oh, we're at a reorganization time. The way we've always done it isn't working anymore. Now what do we do? I don't know. We're going to have to figure it out. It's reorganization time. That's why I'm here. That's why we have a development team now. That's why we're trying all kinds of different stuff. Like not having one long 20-minute sermon, but having a few little shorter ones. See how that worked. I don't know. We are engaged right now in the very process of practicing resilience and developing our capacity to reorganize. Our focus going forward as a group is going to focus on things that could probably named the spirituality of change, adopting change itself as a spiritual practice. We know that the only thing that doesn't change is change. Change will always happen. We will begin to see failure as a learning experience, not as something to be avoided at all costs. We will be willing to take risks and willing to fail in order to learn what we need to know to succeed. We will adopt adventure as an intrinsic part of our community journey. We understand change is the spiritual playing field. We will make investigation of new opportunity, trying out new things, opportunities for growth and learning that will point us to the way forward. And in doing this, we will develop a sense of resilience, that we will be able to bounce back when things happen that we don't have a lot of children around anymore. And how do we solve that problem? We don't have the money we used to have. How do we solve that problem? Right? We're engaged in a world that needs us for social justice in so many more ways than we can even help out all at once. How do we engage that problem? We are going to need to exploit an inherent reality about being a congregation. That we are religious. That we have faith. That we believe there's always more to learn. And we believe that there are enough resources in all our collective imaginations to justify hope. And that, as we learned from Andrew Zolli, is an advantage for survival. We have what it takes. We can get the hula hoop around the circle. We can. We need to deeply trust our faith. Believe hope is real. That reorganization and rebirth and revitalization are possible. And the first step in practicing that, the first step in practicing the resilient advantage of belief is believing it's possible.